Praise be Jesus Christ and Mary Immaculate. Welcome to this fourth Sunday on Lent. We're going to read from the Gospel of John, chapter 9, verses 1 through 41. Chapter 9 of the Gospel of John contains a severe indictment of the blindness, the corporate blindness of a religious institution where protecting the doctrine took precedence over the protecting and the good of the human person. This situation is still around in so many of our places, in so many religious circles of our church today, whereas one of my professors used to remind me, even in a theology study, that there are those who protect rubrics over protecting the human person. The text the text follows Jesus' teaching in the temple. And after a failed attempt from the religious leaders to stone Jesus, Jesus escapes from the temple. However, on his way out of the temple, he meets the people who cannot get into the temple. They stay close to the temple, but they are excluded from entering and to worshiping. And among these were the blind, who were among the people who were not allowed to worship in temple. Let's read from chapter 9 of John's Gospel. And passing by, Jesus saw a man blind from birth. Blindness was not considered an illness, but a punishment, a curse sent by God for the sins of the people. And in order to clear God of such a cruel thing to do, people then shifted blame on themselves or on ourselves, right? Their actions brought on these punishments. And to clear God of evils, the blind man was blamed himself. The disciples of Jesus asked, "Rabbi, who sinned, he or his parents, for having been born blind?" Because blindness was seen as a consequence of sin. The question to ask or to know was the man to be blamed, or was he paying the price for one of his relatives and the sin that they have committed? They see this as divine punishment. And Jesus is very clear. Let me say this. Jesus is very clear, and he distanced himself again from the law of Moses. He distanced himself from the tradition of his religion. And Jesus says, neither he nor his parents have sinned, but it is so that God's work may be made manifest in him. In other words, what's about to happen to the man will be the action of God. It will be the action of the living God working to free his people. Jesus, who is the light of the world, continues his creative action of the Father. The text says that Jesus, having made mud with his saliva, smeared it on the eyes of the blind man. These gestures are the same gestures that we read in the book of Genesis that the Creator made in the creation of the first man, of Adam. It's also important to know here that the word used in the text, smeared or touched, is not really correct. The word used by John is anointed. Jesus anointed the man. We can see the sacramental action here. Then he sends him into the pool of Siloam, this very important pool of Jerusalem, which means sent. Why is this important? Because going towards the one who was sent by the Father as the light of the world, the man recovers his sight. Jesus brings light into this man's life. Jesus brings sight to this man's life. Jesus brings light to his past, to his present, and now he can see a future filled with hope. The blind man has had his eyes opened, and now he can see. And here's the problem with this, because here begins the problems for this man. He has recovered his sight, but now he has all these issues. Why? First thing is, he's not recognized. You notice that his own neighbors don't recognize him. Some say it's him, some say it's not him. He only looks like the one that was there begging. How could they not recognize him? It's not that his physical person has changed. The difference is that now he sees, and before he did not. Now he has light in his eyes, and before they were darkened. Now that he's recovered his sight, now he can see things better. And maybe because he sees things better, now he reacts better. Maybe now he's living differently because he sees differently. See, when you recover your sight, Jesus' action not only recovers his sight, he discovers his dignity, his newfound dignity. You discover your own dignity and your own self-worth. The formerly blind man answers and answers that it is indeed him. He actually says, it's not me, and he uses a name that's reserved only for God. He says, I am. And he claims for himself the divine name, the exclusive name which in the Bible is used for God, and that Jesus uses for himself in the gospel, the great I am. Why is this? Because as it is written in John's prologue, to those who welcome him, Jesus gives the ability to become children of God. We too can become I am when we share in God's life, when we accept the love of the Father, and when we enter into this relationship of love with our Father. Then begins a series of interrogations from the religious leaders to the man. And for the first of 7 times, they asked the man, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? It's a great reflection question for you and I this weekend. What has Jesus done to you? How have you allowed him to work in your life? How has he opened your eyes? And if you haven't experienced that, then the question is, why haven't you allowed Jesus to do something for you? Why haven't you allowed the action of God to change you? Opening of the eyes is an action of the Messiah. It is the liberating action of the Messiah who comes to liberate his people from the blindness that they were either born into or the blindness that has been imposed on them by society and religion. Don't look that way. You may not like it. Don't look at these people. They're not good for you. Don't look at this because you're not supposed to do that. See that? Both society and religion puts blinders on us, and they're not good. A blind man has recovered his sight. That's a good thing for him. Now he can judge for himself. Now he can come up with his own conclusions. And this is good news for him and for the man. But it's not good news for the religious leaders who are in power. Not to those who need him to stay blind. Because if he sees, now he doesn't need them. The Pharisees used to claim, and they used to love the title that they were leaders of the blind. But now this man does not need them. This man can see for himself. And the second big problem is that Jesus heals this man on a Sabbath. And the religious leaders were commanded to observe the Sabbath by not working. At the time of Jesus, there were approximately 1,521 actions that were prohibited to do on a Sabbath, and among these were these 2, the making of mud and the healing of people. So Jesus broke the Sabbath. Yes, let me say that again. Jesus broke the Sabbath. The Pharisees were very quick to judge and condemn Jesus, and they say, this man, Jesus, does not come from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. Meaning, he does not come from God because he doesn't follow rules and regulations. Because for them, to come or not to come from God depends on whether Jesus observes the law. On the other hand, for Jesus, coming or not from God depends on how we care and serve the neighbor, the brother, the sister, the poor. Do we feed the hungry? Do we give water to the thirsty? Do we clothe the naked? Do we visit the prisoner? Do we go see the sick? That, my friends, is the way that Jesus judges whether we come from God or not. The Pharisees do not agree with one another. Some say that he is not from God because he broke the Sabbath, while others say that if he weren't from God, then where does he have the capacity to do these things? But one thing is for sure, that the Pharisees will not bend and accept that their line or their way of thinking is wrong. They do not accept the fact that they are wrong, and they will deny the truth that's right in front of them. They will deny the truth that they can see. They know that this man was blind and now can see, and they just simply don't accept it as truth. They will deny exactly what they're seeing in order to preserve their own power and allegiance. Does that sound familiar to you? And then there is the sentence. While the Pharisees were divided between those who said that Jesus was a sinner and those who say that maybe he's not a sinner, they have no doubt about one thing. The religious authorities never have doubts when it comes to judging people. For them, everything is clear. They say, we know that this man is a sinner. They're convinced of it. And here comes all the irony of the former blind man, who practically replies by saying, listen, I don't know anything about theology. I don't know what you're talking about. That's not my realm. I'm only speaking about my experience, he says. If he is a sinner or not, I don't know. That's your business, if he's a sinner or not. What I know is that I was blind and now I see. He speaks of his own experience. You say that he's a sinner. He says, I don't care. My experience says is that he's from God because he helped me to see and he has brought me life. And again, for a seventh time, the Pharisees asked the question, how did he open your eyes? This is a concern of the religious authority, because if people have their eyes open, it's over for them. Their power is done with. It's the end of everything for them. And with some irony, the man born blind then turns to them and asks, but do you want to become his disciples too? My friends, what is this gospel all about? That this man, having been expelled from the synagogue, having gained his sight, was then kicked out of the synagogue. But not everything is lost. He finds faith. He finds Jesus. He recognizes Jesus. He recognizes Jesus because of the actions that he allowed Jesus to have in his life. And he recognizes the Jesus that was so close to him in his suffering. He recognizes the voice and the action of Jesus in his life. He welcomes Jesus just as Jesus welcomes him and gives him the ability to trust his experience. God trusts in his experience just like God trusts in our experience. He has experienced the work of God in his life, and that, my friends, is not the big lie. That is the big truth. God bless you.